Hello, everybody, and welcome back to ZakIsCinema. Today, we're going to be reviewing and discussing the movie Insidious Chapter 3. Insidious Chapter 3 definitely had the difficult job of continuing a franchise that had really already wrapped up the Lambert family story. So instead of forcing another sequel, this movie goes backwards and gives us Elise's story. And honestly, with Elise being one of the strongest characters within this franchise, it leaves me with the question, was this actually the right direction for Insidious to take? Welcome back to the channel, everybody. If you have been keeping up with our lovely Insidious review series here, or you were just finding me for the very first time, welcome here. If you have nobody to talk to about Insidious, you have now found your place to talk to somebody about the franchise that is Insidious here, because we have a brand new Insidious film coming out in late August here, the sixth one in the franchise. It was not on my radar. This is kind of a little bit of a last minute review series here. I don't think anybody was looking forward or expecting another Insidious movie, but here we are. It gives me a perfect excuse to talk about some of the films, which I definitely love, and this is an important franchise to me, especially these first couple of films here. So today we're going to be talking about the third Insidious movie, and without further ado, let's get started with the review here, starting with the positives or just the things that I enjoyed most about this movie. And now, horror prequels can be kind of hit or miss for me. Sometimes they feel unnecessary. At other times, they feel like they kind of flesh out the story a little bit more and give me answers I was looking at or very curious about. And in this case, I do kind of appreciate that this is a prequel to the first two Insidious films. And I think it makes perfect sense to go in this direction because the first two Insidious films really told the story of the Lambert family and kind of wrapped that up pretty well. So sometimes prequels could just feel like an excuse to kind of keep going and keep delving back into the well that is franchise filmmaking. But this one feels pretty natural because the overall story is kind of looking at Elise here and her history and just telling another story in her little universe here. And I think it's a pretty natural way to do it, especially because Elise here is one of the strongest characters in the franchise and my personal favorite within this franchise. And I think Insidious unfortunately made the similar mistake that Saw did, which is kind of ironic because they're both directed by James Wan. I mean, Saw 3 wasn't, when they killed off Jigsaw way too early, but I think killing Elise here is a little bit better in the first film because it's such a shocking and tragic ending to her character. But at the same time, it does kind of put this franchise in a pretty difficult position because she is really the heart and soul of this franchise. She is the lore dumping character of the further, but more than just a lore dumping character, she is a strong character within this franchise here. She is very interesting, and we want to know more about the further, and to continue on these stories, you kind of need Elise back in the position. So I feel like in this case, in chapter 3, centering an entire movie around Elise, or at least the majority of it, definitely makes a lot of sense to me, and I think is a natural progression of the story within this franchise. She's a character I want to follow, and her history, specifically with the further, is something that's very natural and interesting instead of just forcing another Lambert family story in this third film here. So I think it makes sense, and overall, the prequel angle really works for me here. And I appreciate how Lee Winnell definitely takes from his buddy James Wan here and gets this movie going pretty quickly and establishes such a consistent, straightforward pace almost immediately. For example, this movie has a couple creepy scenes very early on, especially that creepy scene where Quinn is doing her performance audition at a stage play for a school she's trying to get into, and then sees that creepy old dude just waving at her from the nosebleed sections. And then from on that scene, we get to the next scene after she's done with the audition and with one of her friends, and you get this really eerie scene, a little bit closer up of a scene of the old dude just waving, standing in the middle of the road, and definitely one of the best jump scares in horror in general, in my opinion, when she is staring at this old dude just in the middle of the road, confused, looking at him, when all of a sudden this car just rams her over, and you get this cool one-take sequence of the car hitting her, and then the camera being in this handheld format, shaking, going up to her. I think that is an incredible scene. It is shocking. It is surprisingly somewhat graphic for a PG-13 movie. And I remember the first time that I watched this being absolutely shocked and engaged as soon as that sequence happened. Not just by the jump scare, but like I said, just how unpredictable it is to have something happen like that, happen to our main character and completely out there and unexpected and so early on. It is fantastic and such a great way to kind of get your audience engaged in her story. And on top of that, I think overall here, the majority of the scares really work. And I appreciate how this movie continues on the trend of the Insidious trend of messing with people while they're sleeping and exploiting that very vulnerable personal state these people are in. For example, there's an early scene of Quinn after her accident when she's just laying in bed, I believe turns to one side and then the camera flips and you see the creepy old dude, the man who can't breathe, standing behind the see-through curtain that gives you the shadow and outline of him, but you can't just see him, and he is just standing there behind her, covered in darkness and slowly walking towards her to where he kind of disappears and looks like he is about to lay down next to her. She flips over, he's not there, and then there is no jump scare here. I think Lee Winnell, with scenes like that, really hold on to the tension, and he's not afraid to let that stuff build, and just he's not afraid to let that build and not have constant jump scare sequences in here. I think little moments like that really make you question what could be happening when you're trying to personally sleep and have your eyes closed. Like Quinn never even knew that that sequence took place. It's just for the audience perspective, and I love sequences like that in horror, and this movie is full of them. And speaking of the old man demon or the man who can't breathe here, I really enjoy the look and his ongoing presence here. Even though they keep him mostly hidden in the shadows up until the third act, I think that is an incredibly smart decision because it lets your imagination do a lot of the work, which is what some of the best horror movies can really do for you. Old people are creepy in this unsettling, weird way to me, especially in these types of movies. And there's something especially unsettling about a supernatural creature that is this old man that constantly reminds you of your own mortality as well. So I think that element thrown into this guy is incredibly creative. And I think even though Lee Winnell does a great job at building tensions and having some incredibly creative scare sequences, I think he also continues on the Insidious trend of having some fantastic jump scares here. There's a great sequence where just a loud boom, nothing is shown, but a loud boom when it startles and wakes Elise up in the middle of the night, and then she's just staring off into her ceiling and gets the name of Quinn and writes it down, and she is clearly seeing something disturbing, but the camera never shows it, again playing on that imagination aspect as well. And then I love the sequence of Elise walking down to her reading room that is locked up because she sees the footprints from the old man, the man who can't breathe, and she is following the footsteps down there, and then all of a sudden the footsteps start going up her ceiling. She's looking up, and then boom, the old man guy, the man who can't breathe, is just like hanging in a corner like a fucking bat in her reading room. And it is an incredible jump scare sequence and just incredibly terrifying in and of itself. But probably my favorite scare sequence in this movie is that video chat scene with Quinn and her friend. Her friend notices someone standing next to her, but Quinn can't see it. Then all of a sudden the FaceTime or video call just freezes. Then we pick up with Quinn just kind of looking around, and again she sees that old man demon behind her curtain again, and then he slowly slowly walks towards her, vanishes, and then just throws her off the bed. And because this is after her accident, she can't get up, she can't do anything to defend herself. And then just following this creepy old dude's footsteps, we see him close the blind, slowly walk over to the door, shut the door, turn the lights off, slowly close her laptop. Just one sequence after another of him just slowly creating darkness around this character of Quinn. And then we get that one final jump scare at the end of it. It is an incredible scene. It has such a great scare because there is so much tension, anticipation leading up to the actual payoff of the sequence here. It is an incredible standout, incredibly creative scene that really showed some of the early talents of Leigh Whannell here as well. And I think even outside the old man demon, there is a ton of creepy visuals outside of that. One of my favorites is when Quinn is brought upstairs in her sleep. She starts using her wheelchair to get to the elevator, and all of a sudden you see the creepy old guy just grab her fucking wheelchair and then bring her really quickly to the room that is right above her and her family's apartment. And then all of a sudden you get this creepy visual where we later find out is actually the further version of Quinn here, but it is this girl just crawling slowly towards her with no mouth, no face, no arms, and no legs, just completely unnaturally slowly crawling towards Quinn, who is just left on the ground helpless. And it is surprisingly creative and graphic for a PG-13 movie. It feels like one of those weird nightmare images that you wouldn't expect to see in the franchise, and is so confusing and disorienting, you're afraid to see it in your sleep later on. And I'm not the biggest fan, unfortunately, of Dermot Mulroney and his acting. I don't know. I've just never been a Dermot Mulroney fan, in my opinion. But on top of that, besides that, I do appreciate how they at least write the father character here. He doesn't necessarily believe everything Quinn is saying about the demons and the further, but he does believe someone or something is trying to kill his daughter. And that's enough for him to reach out to Elise and is being very willing to work with her just to try and save his daughter here. I like that he's written more than just the stereotypical horror dad who refuses to believe his children until it's way too late. He's skeptical but believes his daughter, so I believe they found a great balance and nuance to his character, even if I'm not the biggest fan of the actor himself. And I think this movie does a great job at expanding the further and the lore of this franchise. For example, I really enjoy how they expand the woman in black character and kind of tie her even deeper to Elise personally. We learn that this is actually a spirit that not only attached itself to Josh, but has been trying to kill Elise ever since Elise went into the further to try and talk to and see her dead husband. I think this adds another layer to the movie because it means the woman in black has been trying to kill Elise for years before even the first Insidious movie, and she ultimately uses Josh too in the first couple of movies to accomplish exactly that. I mean, the woman in black does kill her in the first Insidious movie, so it ties this like deeper lore. It expands upon that idea, and it makes Elise's death in the original even more tragic because you have more context to that sequence, and this demon essentially gets exactly what it's been trying to do for years and years. So it does what a prequel should do. It expands the franchise and adds more to the movies you have already seen. So when you go back and watch the first one, Elise's death is even more tragic, and it's just a simple change like that in this one that makes it even better. And I also love the very brief moment, but it really stood out to me where this movie almost kind of goes full Evil Dead with Quinn in the scene where she is waking up possessed and immediately turning on her father, and in this demonic voice telling him that he's useless and that his wife died just to get away from him. Then her possessed body starts violently kicking her leg casts off on her bed frame in this most violent, uncomfortable way possible, just so the demon can walk a little bit more easily towards her father with a switchblade knife. And then we get this incredible shot of when the family and Tucker and Specs hold down Quinn, and we see something coming up her throat, and then you get this incredible shot of the back of Quinn's throat where you just see a demon's eyeball in the back of her throat. It is such a fucked up, incredibly creative visual, and I love that Insidious was pushing itself here to get a little bit more grotesque, weird, and unnatural within that PG-13 limit. Incredibly creative, and I'm surprised more movies haven't tried to do that visual. But with that said, let's jump over to my mixed elements for this film. And to me, the third act, the final conclusion wrap-up sequences aren't terrible, but they feel a lot more just easy, straightforward, and forgettable, especially at this time within this franchise. The first two movies I felt like really built towards these unique third acts involving the further, but here it's essentially another storyline where someone is trying to get someone out of the further to bring them back. So it does the same thing again, but in the first two I feel like it was fresher compared to this third one. So I wish they did something a little bit different with that, because usually the third act is where these Insidious movies really find their identity and do something that really stands out here. But this one feels like the weakest so far in my rewatches. I don't know how I'll feel about the other ones. I haven't seen them in quite some time, but it feels just somewhat rushed and going through the motions. Like they have to have Elise find Quinn in the further because that's what these Insidious movies do. And a lot of that feeling to me comes down to how convenient the third act feels. Elise doesn't really face that many obstacles in getting Quinn back, and then conveniently shows up at that exact right moment to really save the day and save Quinn. And I'm sitting here thinking, where the fuck was her mother this entire movie? I mean, Quinn has desperately needed help this entire time, but only her mother shows up exactly at the last second for when the plot and the script needs it. So I wish there was a little bit more to that, a little bit more fleshed out, maybe more expanded of her mother, trying to, but was derailed by other demons, and she finally pushes through to kind of give an arc to the dead mother's character, but just feels so convenient. Feels like a portal scene out of Endgame of just them showing up, but without any of the proper setup here. And as much as I really do enjoy this movie and find it extremely underrated and underappreciated, I can't help but wonder how much better I would have liked this if it went the full Elise prequel story. I keep imagining something like The Conjuring with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and instead here with Elise and her husband are the central paranormal investigating couple, almost like Ed and Lorraine Warren, and then we get this tragic love story of them fighting demons, and that tragic story of her husband committing suicide and her finally exploring the further for the first time to find him. I feel like that would make a lot more sense for this prequel story instead of balancing between Elise and Quinn. I felt like we should have gone full Elise. I think Elise deserves her own movie here. It would have fleshed out Elise, the further, the woman in black more, and giving it a deeper connection to Elise's past, seeing this kind of play out. And you could even still bring Tucker and Specs into the movie here, who eventually help save Elise, and then that's how they start working together. I really like Chapter 3, but Quinn, her family, all those other additional characters aren't really as interesting as the Lambert family, nowhere near as interesting as Elise is, because she is still the standout. And honestly, if we never got Quinn as a character or character again, I wouldn't be too upset, because Elise is why I'm here for this prequel story. So I'm kind of mixed because I enjoy the product that they gave me, but I wonder how the product would feel tasting it if they made a couple of these changes. But with that said, let's jump over to my negatives, or the things that I just didn't really like about this movie. And unfortunately, some of the acting, dialogue, and writing, especially early on, is pretty rough. The actress playing Quinn is fine, but like the family dynamics don't really feel very natural. The brother and sister dynamic, while limited, feels like it kind of stands out and is dialogue written to tell you that these are your stereotypical bickering siblings. Like they feel like the characters that would address each other in those movies that call each other siblings like little brother or big sister or something like that, rather than just letting us understand it through interactions and actions. And on top of that, I'm not the biggest Dermot Mulroney fan, like I mentioned previously, and there's a couple early scenes that don't work for me. I can't tell if it's him or the writing, because obviously I had the same issue with him in Scream 6. I've just never been a big fan. He always just kind of comes off as awkward and uncomfortable to me. There's one scene of him trying to get his son ready for school early on, and he throws open the door and he's like, "You see this face? This face is my whoop ass face, and it's ready to whoop ass," or something like that. And the delivery is so just kind of awkward. Again, I can't tell if it's the acting or writing here, or maybe a mix of both, but that kind of stands out to me. The early scenes of the family is just very unnatural. Like, they don't speak like human beings, they speak like movie characters. And there's more scenes and examples of this being poorly written and strangely delivered. For example, there's basically a moment where Dermot Mulroney's character is shouting at his daughter about how his mother isn't around. Quinn is constantly shouting about the mother not being around and how she has to step up for the family to take care of it, because he's constantly shouting about how stressed he has no time. I can't do this. And the movie's just overly explaining a family dynamic that is pretty obvious. Like, it's not that deep here. And instead of the characters naturally communicating it, it feels like a lot of these early scenes are a little bit more forced, poorly written, and just come off as kind of awkward. Luckily, it doesn't last too long. And once that car accident scene takes place, you're kind of fully in it at that point. But the first like 15 minutes is pretty choppy and pretty rough at times. But besides that, I would say overall, Insidious Chapter 3, in my opinion, is an underrated prequel with some of the franchise's best scares and a smart focus on Elise, even if its weaker characters and rushed third act kind of hold it back. So for my rating for this movie, this is a movie that I own on DVD. I also own it on Blu-ray. They do not make a 4K one for this, but this was a good purchase for me at a discount. I wanted a part of my collection. I wanted a part of my Insidious franchise collection as well. Would I pay full price for it at the time? Probably not, but I'm glad I got it at a pretty steep discount because I like owning it. So you guys have my thoughts here on Insidious Chapter 3. Please down below let me know. What do you think about Insidious Chapter 3? Did you see it when it came out? Are you also rewatching all of these or watching these for the first time? Let me know your thoughts and feelings on this movie down below. But that's about it. I appreciate anybody watching my videos, so thank you so much. And yeah, look forward to more ZakIsCinema coming very soon.